Okay, so should I introduce myself now?
Yeah.
Okay, hi everyone. It's really nice to meet all of you. I am Tista. I am currently an undergraduate student at Ashoka University, as it says in my bio. A little bit about Ashoka. It's one of the more new universities that has been set up in India. And I will be majoring in biology and probably minoring in psychology. And I'm also the co-director of the Action Potential Advisement Program out here at SL. Over to you, Inchara.
Hi, everyone. I'm Inchara. I've just finished my first year at the University of Warwick. I study psychology with linguistics. At Simply Neuroscience, I'm the vice president of the board of directors and the co-director of events. I've also been trying to get some work experience as the psychology student experience coordinator at my university alongside my degree. Yeah, that's just a brief intro about me. I think we can head into any questions you all may have now.
While we're waiting for experiences, maybe we could talk a little bit about the subjects that we're studying while we're in university.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can go first and then I'll follow.
Yeah, since I'm majoring in biology, I basically have a bunch of bio courses that I'm going to be doing with the coming year because I also just finished my first year. So we study more of a general sort of all encompassing type of this thing. So I have courses that include things like molecular biology, and I have cellular biology. I have a lab that's molecular genetics, and I have a course that I'm really excited for, which is the Intro to Neuroscience course that I'm going to be doing this semester. So that's a little bit about what I'm studying right now.
So for me, my first year was basically just some foundation modules to get some skills strengthened. So we had an academic skills module that talked about academic referencing, plagiarism, and some things like that. And we had a research methods module in which we studied different types of analyses. Like if you're familiar with statistics, we had t-tests, ANOVAs, z-tests. So just basically statistics that psychologists use during research. And we also had a basic statistics module. So basically the research methods one was more practical based. We tried to solve actual research based questions, whereas statistics was the concepts themselves. And apart from that, I had one very science based module. It was quite a bit of psychobiology, brain mechanisms, neurons, action potentials, that sort of thing. And I also had another module that focused more on the humanitarian aspect of psychology, for example, social psychology, the history of psychology. We also touched briefly on developmental psychology and some topics within memory. And as I mentioned, I do psychology with linguistics. So I had one basics of linguistics module. Does anyone have any questions for us? Okay, while we're still waiting, I guess we could just talk a bit about any other experiences we're having just at university in general. So, for example, my work experience has been really great, and I would highly recommend for anyone who can to get some work experience alongside uni, because it gives you not only something to put on your CV, but a greater exposure into everything for later. So my job is essentially to work with the department and create social media posts for their Instagram, Twitter, etc. And also design some informative posters for the corridors. And we also have a psychology common room. So we put up new stuff every now and then there. And I also worked as a research assistant for a couple of months this year. So the project was about the intersection between linguistics and psychology, like how the brain interprets different combinations of letters, and you respond slower to some combinations than others. Basically, participants were asked to pick whether words were real or not, and letter primes were given to see if they affected different combinations. So all in all, I would highly recommend getting some other experiences alongside your degree because it's really beneficial on the whole. Tista, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, before I do add, Brooklyn says, what has drawn you both to neuroscience and what do you plan to do with your future degrees pertaining to psychology or neuroscience? Should I go with it first?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So essentially, I've sorry, I have a cough. I've had a very long this debate about what it is specifically within biology I want to do, because as I'm sure all of you know, biology is a very, very, very vast field. But in particular, where as far as neuroscience is concerned, I genuinely think that the brain and the functioning of the nervous system is one of the most fascinating things out there. And the idea that first drew me to it was that this is your seat of how your perceived reality is all in this and not really in other stuff. And then I kind of tried to go into the science of that, and that's how I started with neuroscience. As far as what I want to do with my degree, to be honest, I'm not very sure. I could get into working into diseases like Parkinson's, but I could also get into neuroethology. And I think the part of the whole college experience is allowing yourself some time to kind of figure out what it is specifically that you want to do. Inchara?
Yeah, definitely agree with what you said about figuring it out. So what drew me to psychology was probably, I'm sure you'll agree with me about this too. Living in a country like India, you see a lot of things like learning disabilities go unnoticed, and even just mental health in general. It goes quite unnoticed. And I had seen a lot of kids around me struggling just in general with mental health and some with learning disabilities. So I wanted to enter a field where I could equip myself to help out. And I think that's what really drew me to psychology. As to what I want to do in the future, I think I want to go into research, maybe something in those fields, research regarding learning disabilities. That's what I'm inclined towards at the moment, but I'm keeping an open mind because I think that's the best thing to do while you're at university. Just take your time to explore all the different options. I think we have another question in the chat. So Heba says, I will be studying biochemistry soon. However, I've checked the course list and we don't have something related to neuroscience, and we don't have the specialization for it. I'm interested in neuroscience, so I'm wondering if there's any tips on how I can immerse myself in neuroscience outside of uni. I'm also planning to continue master's related to neuroscience. Do I need to enroll in neuroscience online courses for it? Thank you. Should I start, Tista? Okay. So I don't think it's such a big problem if you don't have neuroscience related courses at your uni, because there's a lot of other ways you can try and hone your interests and try and pursue it alongside your degree. I would suggest checking in your uni again, because sometimes there's an option to do outside modules that aren't just a part of your course, but you can look outside within other departments. But if that's not possible, I think you can definitely look online. Places like Coursera definitely have some really amazing courses to offer, and you can have a look at those. You can also look at different pages on Instagram. I think if you just want to get a feel of different things that you can look at within neuroscience, there's plenty of reading material available on the internet and plenty of books as well. I don't really think I can recommend any particular ones off the top of my head, but if you have a look through, you'll definitely find some things that you can look at. As for the requirement of doing something prior to master's, I'm not too sure. I do believe with a biochemistry course that's quite broad, so you can enter a lot of different things. I think, Tista, you might be able to better than me. So if you want to take on that bit.
Yeah, I actually wanted to say so. I have this mentor who did his undergrad in engineering. I'm sorry, my internet is not very good. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, sorry. So I have a mentor who did engineering in his undergrad, and now he's working on really cool neuroscience related projects because he did neuroscience in his masters. So I wouldn't really worry about that too much. I mean, you are still in the field of science, which is something that you can still always shift over to. And as far as resources, I had one that I had in mind that I think I could recommend to you. If you're interested in behavioral neuroscience, there's this lecture series that's been posted by Stanford University on YouTube. It's by this professor called Robert Sapolsky, and I think there are about 25 1 hour long videos of all of his lectures in that one particular course. So if you are interested, you should definitely go and check that out. If we can move on to the next question, Ankit says, is there any course or program you know that I can learn about neuroscience? Since I'm on my college is computer science, but also interested in neuroscience too. And admission process for Ashoka. Um, I am not, I assume that if you're asking for admission process, I assume masters since you're already enrolled undergrad. And I'm not very sure about what the master's admission process is. And um, Inchara, do you have any idea about what you can do post computer science in undergrad?
Um, I am not too sure. So if you want to get an exposure to neuroscience along with your degree, as I said previously, I think you can look at courses on Coursera and similar platforms, and also just do like a broad read. And then for the admissions process, I'm not too sure either. If it's for masters, if it's for undergrad, I think we can both help out, but for masters, we're not really sure. Okay, so we have another question that says, how did you both decide your respective unis? What will you recommend when it comes to applying to uni process for a psych major? Thanks. You can start if you want to start.
Oh, okay. Mine is pretty short because going abroad, there was definitely like a financial issue involved because going abroad is incredibly expensive if you don't have a scholarship. But even despite that, Ashoka was always my number one option because, first of all, I was familiar with the faculty and the work that some of the faculty had done, and I really wanted to work with them somewhere along later. And one of the problems in India is sometimes the college courses are very theory filled, but Ashoka makes sure that you have a lot of lab exposure and a lot of practical hands-on work, and so that was a huge deciding factor in me going there. That's with biology, but
Cool, cool. So for me, I was sure I wanted to go to the UK, and it was just deciding between unis there. And I definitely think as an international student, finances are a major deciding factor. And the University of Warwick was offering me a scholarship, which is why I chose it. But in retrospect, I'm really glad I did because I'm really enjoying their course structure. It's very research oriented. And what I would recommend when it comes to the process is, so I can mainly talk about the UK process because that's what I worked with. And for that, you have to write a personal statement, which basically talks about why you want to study the subject you're studying, what drove you to it, what have you done so far to show your interest in the subject, and things like that. So I think my major piece of advice when it comes to that would be to just make sure every experience you've had, you can somehow tie it in. No experience is not valuable when it comes to writing an essay or a personal statement. You just have to find the right way to string it in and the right way to correlate it with what you'd like to study. And apart from that, I think it's important to show that you have interest in what you're studying. There's no point in just saying, I'm interested in this or I'm interested in that. You need to really show what you've done to express that interest, because I think that's what universities are looking for when they're looking to admit students, because it's really important to keep in mind they get thousands and thousands of applications. So you really need yours to stand out and be a bit different. Does anyone else have any more questions?
Hiba says, how does being an SN help you with your academic interest in neuroscience? What other outside of uni activities are you doing during your undergrad? Should I go first?
Sure.
Yeah. SN, the thing that it's helped me with the most is that it's helped me kind of get in touch with people who are interested in a similar career path as I am, from across the world. So, for example, I met Inchara because of SN, and I wouldn't have ever known her without it. And this has happened with a lot of other people. And besides, with the program I work with, we get to match mentors and mentees. I also decided one day to just match myself, and I got to have a proper mentor who I meet with regularly, who can talk me through a bunch of different things. So that really helped. And outside UD activities, truth be told, you can do anything that first piques your interest, and secondly, anything that might help you develop skills that will help in your career path. So it doesn't, so suppose you want to major in, say, biology, you don't necessarily have to do an internship where you are doing different sorts of lab experiments. But if you can do something that will, say, help you build your analytical or logical reasoning skills, that is something that a lot of post grad or master's level people will be able to appreciate. Stuff I do is I work in labs, I work in different um, collectives, the bio society, things like that. Inchara?
Yeah, I definitely echo your point about meeting some really amazing people through SN. And yeah, the same thing. You would never have thought you'd meet these people without this organization. And as for academic interest, I think SN does such a wide variety of things, from planning events to putting up informative social media posts and just so many different things that you learn from people and by doing research to conduct these things. For what I'm doing outside of uni, I think I briefly spoke about this earlier. I'm working part-time for the psychology department, so I get to interact with some of the academics. I did a short interview series for the social media post, just understanding their research really briefly. I also worked as a research assistant, which I talked about earlier. Apart from that, I also work with a company called Funderland, which aims to teach kids grammar and encourages them to read through fun workshops and reading clubs. Yeah, I think that's me. Okay, so moving on to the next question. If someone has a lot of ECA or projects, then how many times they show to admission for undergrad, what is the exact work hours for a school student to show they're well-organized student? I'm not completely sure I understand this question. Tista, do you want to shed some light if you get it?
I think what they're saying is, I'm assuming ECA means extracurricular activities. So, how many hours are you supposed to say you've done whatever it is that you've done, to show that you are someone they should take for their university?
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So I would say you don't need to have a set amount of hours. It's just the experiences that you have. I don't really think anyone's going to question you about how many hours exactly you've spent on what. It's just more of showing what you've learned from the experience, what you've taken out of it, and how you're applying it. Tista, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I absolutely echo your sentiments, because if no one's going to look, unless it's something like community service for which people used to say you have to do 150 hours, no one is going to look at the amount of time you've done it as so much so as what you did in that amount of time. So, as long as you make sure that you're doing quality stuff, whatever it is, I don't think you really need to worry about work hours and things like that. There's a question for you, Inchara. How did you get a scholarship in Warwick? Was it need based or merit based?
So, the University of Warwick has about 250 scholarships to offer for international undergraduate students. It's called the Warwick Global Excellence Scholarship. So I applied through that, and there's varying levels that they cover. I think you can get, so the fees for an international student is about £27,000. So you can get the whole thing, around half of it, or around a quarter of it, if I'm not wrong. Don't quote me on these numbers, they're not exact, but it's in the ballpark of that. So yeah, the application process was I had to write 5 essays. So yeah, merit based, you can say. It was asking about your experiences and why it's really important to you that you get a scholarship, things like that. I believe that they've now cut it down to 1 essay, but yeah, that's the process behind it.
We
Okay.
also have a clarification here, about how they got questioned from university and they asked how they manage their time. How would you answer a question if you were asked how would you manage your time?
Okay. So I definitely think that's a question that varies from person to person. So you should probably give a more personalized answer to that question, because if the university is asking you, they mean it specifically to you. Like they're probably asking you to talk about what you do on a daily basis. So you can probably talk about how you make time for everything that you've been doing. So for example, if someone were to ask me that question, I would say I'm a night owl, so I work late into the night usually. So I try and finish my academics during the first part of the day, and then I focus on everything else that I'm doing. But as I said, this is not a generalizable question. So I think if anyone's asked this question, they'll need to reflect and talk about their own day and how it's structured. Tista?
Oh, I completely agree with you. I think when a university is asking this question, at the most I can tell you that they're not looking for a like a robotic uniform type of answer, but what they are looking for is someone who uses their time in a valuable way, if I may say so that way. And however that is entirely dependent on you, because um, again, something that they'll consider is what valuable means to one person might mean something else to some other person. So for example, if you don't like reading, If I say that I spend half my day reading, you might think that that's not a useful waste of your time, whereas something else might be, and it can happen vice versa. So that's something that's very personalized to you, as long as you kind of give what they're looking for, if I'm making sense. Do we have any other questions?
I don't think we have any yet. Maybe let's give it a minute or two and see if anyone else has any questions.
We have one more. How do you make the most out of your undergraduate experience in terms of development and academic interest? It feels like undergrad years will pass so fast that it's not even enough to fit everything in 3 or 4 years of studying, and maybe some mental health tips to become a more mindful student. Would you like to go first?
Okay, sure. So that's a really hard question because I think it's just things people pick up on by experience. That's certainly the case for me. I think I'm still getting into the swing of, uni and how it works and all of that. So, how to make the most of your undergraduate years? I think it's important to give yourself time to explore because for the first time you're out of the chains you were bound by during high school. I think for most of us it's the first time we're really on our own, exploring the world on our own terms. And I definitely think it's important to give yourself time to get used to all of that. Personal development, I think the best thing to do is to keep an open mind at all times. Just remember that every person you come across is going to be a learning experience for you because you've probably spent your life so far in one town, in one high school with a similar set of people, but suddenly you're in a much more global place and you can certainly take away something from every person you meet. With it not being enough time to fit everything, I think I definitely agree. Like, I've taken one whole year to get into the swing of it, and it hit me very recently that I'm already done with 1/3 of my degree because I'm on a 3-year course. So I only have 2 years left. And I definitely don't think that's enough time, but there's nothing you can do about it, right? I think you just have to, coming back to your first point, you need to make the most of it, which you will figure out as it goes by. I think the most important thing to do is do everything you feel like doing. Don't have any regrets later that you could have done something and you didn't. Um, Studying. Academic interest, yeah, explore. A lot of unis have options to do like outside modules, not just within your course, but you can study a vast variety of things. So definitely explore and see what you can do. Mental health tips, give time to yourself. I think that's a really major one because when you enter uni, it's really easy to just get lost in the buzz of meeting new people and trying to then expand your social circles and be out all the time. But I think it's equally important to give time to yourself because you've just changed. You've had a major change. You've jumped from high school to university, and that's a lot to take. So I think giving yourself time to adjust and adapt and just taking some time for yourself where you're doing maybe a hobby. If you like reading, then maybe read a little bit more, listen to some calming music. And I'd also recommend staying on a schedule because I do believe universities have more staggered classes, at least in some places. That's how it was for me personally. So it took a while to get onto a healthy schedule, but I definitely think that helps. Tista.
Yeah, I that schedule thing made me think, like, I'm gonna say the mindfulness thing first, because whatever you do, don't procrastinate. Because I have been on both ends of the balance that is procrastination, and I have suffered incredibly when I procrastinate. But with uni, the thing is, if you try to stay on top of your work, and I'm gonna tell you now itself, you're gonna feel like you're not on top of your work. But if you try to stay on top of it, and you don't keep everything for, say, finals week or something, and you can finish everything as early as possible, you will feel much better about yourself and whatever work it is that you've turned in, and everything in general. And as far as you make the most out of your undergraduate experience, it is a very small amount of time. This I had that same little bit of existential crisis that Inchara was talking about how I've already finished a year of my degree. Where's all of that time gone? And I also have this feeling like I'm not getting to take all the courses that I want to take. So I don't know if all different unis have this concept, but in my uni, you can do this thing where you can audit a course. So if you want, and if you can do that, take whatever you have to take to get your degree and whatnot. But suppose you see that there's some sort of performing arts course that you want to take, and if you're allowed to take it in the structure, go for it. Go for that course that may not necessarily make sense to your major, but something that you really, really want to do, and you have that option. Just go for it. Trust me, you can audit it, or you can, it might just work as a breather. And my second tip would be to do whatever readings you've been asked to do, because as classes move on, things are going to get tougher. And if you don't do your readings, you're going to have no idea what's happening in class. And that will just increase the backlog of work, because if you have no idea of what's happening in class, you won't be able to take notes properly and stuff like that. I hope that answers your question. So let's move on to the next one. What are the things that you both think we should know before joining the college that can help in transitioning to the college? Inchara?
I think one thing is definitely that the way you do coursework in college could be quite different to the way you've been doing it up to that point. It certainly was a big transition for me. So I just think you should know that even if you were doing really, really well in high school, you need to give yourself some time. I'm going to say the same thing as I said previously, give yourself time, because you might not be doing amazing to the same level as soon as you get into college, because it's a completely different thing. And you need to get used to it. And apart from that, things you think that you should know, I think we've covered it in a bunch of previous answers, to be honest, between the two of us. So, like, keep an open mind, explore, just get to know new people. Even if you end up going to the same university as a couple of friends, make sure you don't stick with them all the time, because it's a great place to network and expand your social circles, because you meet not only people from your own course, but so many different courses. So it's a great way to meet people with a bunch of different interests and just learn about the backgrounds they've come from and the interests that they have. Anything to add, Tista?
No, you pretty much covered it. Just the best thing I can summarize it in is just go with an open mind, whatever you do, because there are going to be a bunch of different things that you've never tried before. Moving on to the next question, Maria says, can you explain the differences between a major and a minor? Does taking a minor have an additional fee charge? Would you personally recommend taking a minor? I can take this. I'm not very sure. I can only talk about Ashoka, but I do know that Ashoka has modeled itself in a way after some of the US universities. So at least in Ashoka, you don't have to pay extra to do a minor. So essentially, what the difference between a minor and a major is, for a major, you need to complete, say, about 15 courses to earn that degree and say, okay, she's completed a major. Whereas for a minor, you only need to you need to do about 6 courses, and then if your university has it, you can also do a thing called a concentration, where you only need to do 4 courses to get that name. But yeah, so that is the difference between major and minor. Minor is basically a small amount of the same portion of another subject. And would I recommend taking a minor? Again, if you can and you have the means, absolutely. It might add a little bit of academic load, but it will also allow you to open yourself up to an entirely different range of subjects. And you can get to study other stuff that's not necessarily in your major. So I might do a computer science minor or a psychology minor, which is going to be a nice break from sitting and studying about biology the entire day. You know what I mean? So yeah, if you have the resources and you have access to it, I definitely recommend taking a minor. Inchara?
I think you've covered it. The UK actually doesn't have this concept of majors and minors, so I don't think I'd have very much to add. What I'm doing is a joint honors, which is how most universities in the UK work. Even though the split between the two subjects you study may not be equal, they call it a joint honors. So they have equal weight when you get your degree, if that makes sense. Okay, so I think we have another question. They say, how do you find experience and practice with manuscripts? None of my lectures at university have any opportunities, and I don't know where to find opportunities.
Can you quickly clarify? I'm not sure what manuscripts means.
Yeah,
Like academic paper? Okay,
oh,
academic papers. Me? Oh, okay. Yeah, how do you find an experience? Okay, so I'm not sure if you say your university doesn't have access. I know a lot of them have a requirement that you have to pay for it, but I'm not so sure that I should be recommending this, but I'm not very sure of the names, but there are certain sites where you can read articles that may have been on something like JSTOR for free. But I do know that publications like JSTOR have 10 free articles. So a lot of them have a bunch of free articles, like a limited number that you can access. But if not, ideally a university would give you access to all of these different articles, because most of them are paid for. As far as if you mean reading manuscripts, and what my experience with having to go through them is, sometimes they can be extremely tedious, because I know a lot of them have really high fancy words that most of the time while I read, I was thinking that this is completely unnecessary. You could have said it in much simpler language. But a lot of the times you just have to power through it. Hopefully, if it's a subject that interests you, you might find it interesting. But if it's not, my best advice would be power through it.
yeah, I definitely agree. I think I would definitely recommend checking with your university if they have a subscription or like library access to view articles online, because I believe most universities do. So maybe reach out to a professor just to ask if there's a way you can get access. But if you don't, then I think you don't find an awful lot on places like Google Scholar, but it's definitely a place to try searching because you can find access to some things. And apart from that, I think Tista covered the rest. Okay, does anyone else have any questions?
We have one more. How do you build your habits / schedule, especially during the summer? I found myself wasting a lot of time. I think that is also incredibly depending on person to person. So I have friends who did a lot of internships, so they spend the entire summer just working away. But then you can also do stuff that's for personal development. I think it always works for me when I set small, accomplishable goals for myself for a day. So, for example, if I like, I'm doing a computer programming course on Coursera right now. If I, instead of saying I will finish the entire module today, most likely I know that is not going to happen. And because I know that's not going to happen, I won't do anything. However, if I say I'm going to watch 3 or 4 videos and do one exercise from the module, that is something that is very doable. And which is why I find that I tend to kind of do it. So, kind of reverse psychology myself into working. So that is my method of working when I'm on my own and I don't have pressure.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think something that really helps me is having everything I need to do written down in front of me, because then I feel like all my tasks are just staring right at me and I won't be at peace unless I do them. So I usually have a schedule board on my desk that has the tasks that I need to do every day of the week and just some general to do tasks that I need to accomplish by the end of the week. It can be anything from a really simple task to a really elaborate task, but just writing it down really helps because I feel like I've accomplished something every time I scratch something or tick something off that list. And I feel like that's a really good way to do it. For summer, I would definitely recommend getting a breather, like definitely get some work experience or an internship if you can, or even try learning something new, but definitely take some time to yourself. Okay, I think we have a question. Uh, how did you come to know about Simply Neuroscience? How do your work look like there? What are things you have learned from there that have really changed your lives? I think we briefly touched on this earlier, right, Tista? Should we just briefly go over it again? So I think the main thing that we both said earlier was the people, the network that we've built through Simply Neuroscience. We would have never had the chance to meet some of these amazing people if it wasn't for the network Simply Neuroscience has. And also just taking part in neuroscience related events and all the initiatives that we have really helped build our interest and our skill set within the subject. Anything to briefly add, Tista?
Yeah, and how, as far as how I came to know about Simply Neuroscience, it's through Instagram. Like everyone from our generation finds stuff nowadays. But yeah, it's this pretty much the same thing as Inchara. I've had a ton of fun out there, and honestly, my biggest learning apart from the proper sciencey stuff is learning how to use Excel. I remember when I came in, I was very raw with that, and now I've become much better at Excel than I was. But yeah, it's the people, meeting all of these really intelligent, amazing people, and learning about where they want to go in life is incredibly inspiring, and it makes you want to be better yourself, just so that you could, you know, you're like, I'm working with these people. These people are my colleagues. Um, yeah, that question, I think you've answered, Inshira, the Warwick question.
Yeah, so I think I'm just going to briefly talk about it. So the question is, does work offer any international students a research opportunity for undergraduate students? So um, this is for any students at work, I don't think it's specific to international students, but they have this scheme called the Undergraduate Research Support Scheme. It's called the URSS. And if you apply, you can get funding to lead your own research project during any of the summers of your undergraduate degree. And this project doesn't have to be within the course that you're studying. You can apply to do a project under any department. The only condition is you need a supervisor. So you need to reach out to a supervisor beforehand and check if they're willing to guide you on your project. And then you can apply for the funding. They also have another scheme called the PRSDS. And this is more, it's like a research assistant role, but it's not paid. This is what I did earlier on in the year. Basically, if one of the academics are leading a project and they need help, they reach out to the students and you can apply to be a part of it. And you will basically learn about the academics research that is currently going on and be able to help out with it. So for the link, yeah, I just put the URSS one in the chat. For PRSDS, there isn't a specific link. Once you're enrolled on a course in Warwick, you will get constant updates regarding what you can apply to. Does anyone else have any questions? If not, I think we can wrap up. Do you have anything to add, Tista?
Yeah, no, it's almost 7:30. Thank you everyone for coming today. It's been incredibly nice to talk to all of you. Or try to talk at least.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking out the time to be here, everyone. We've really enjoyed this, and we hope we've been able to help in whatever way we could.
Thank you for coming.